Hey you guys, we're in Chapter 1, Part 6. We are solving absolute value equations and inequalities. So we left off here in class. We're about to solve multi-step absolute value equations. Alright, so looking at this problem, solving a multi-step absolute value equation, we're going to follow the same steps that we saw before, which is first, isolate your absolute value. So to do this, let me change colors. To do this, we first want to distribute if we can, which there's no parentheses here, so we can't distribute. Remember, you cannot distribute inside absolute value. Then you want to decide if you need to add or subtract. And to get rid of this minus 1 here, we need to do the opposite. So we'll add 1. And what you do to one side of your equal sign, you do to the other. So then we have 3 times the absolute value of x plus 2 is equal to 8 plus 1, which is 9. Our absolute value still is not isolated, so now we'll want to divide both sides by 3 to undo that multiplication. We'll use division. So now we have the absolute value of x plus 2 is equal to 3. At this point, we want to set up case 1 and case 2. So case 1, we have x plus 2 is equal to 3. And case 2, we have x plus 2 is equal to negative 3. Again, notice I did not change the expression inside of the absolute value. That stayed the same. I just changed the value of the 3. I made it negative. So now I'm going to solve case 1 and case 2, and both of these are pretty easy to solve. I'm going to say minus 2, minus 2. So here x is equal to 1, and subtracting 2 here, I'm going to get x is equal to negative 5. So my solution here, I can write my solution in braces. My solution is going to be negative 5, comma 1, where I wrote the smaller number first and then the larger number. I'm using braces instead of parentheses because a parenthesis would indicate an ordered pair. And now I just need to graph it. So my smaller number is negative 5, so I'll start at negative 6 and go up. And these are going to be closed circles. I'm going to have a closed circle at negative 5, and I'm going to have a closed circle at 1. Remember, only open circles are for greater than or less than signs, and there's only shading when you have inequalities. Alright, so you guys try your problem, and then carry on to the next problem. Alright. The last thing to look at the Part 1 notes is looking at extraneous solutions. Now, an extraneous solution is a solution that does not work. So I told you we're always going to have 2 answers. Well, sometimes for absolute values, you do all the work correctly and you get 2 answers, but one of them, if you actually plugged it back in, it doesn't work. It does not make a true statement. So we need to check and look out for these extraneous solutions because we might say something's a solution when it's really not. So all we have to do is check our work. So we're going to go about it the same way, but at the end we're going to check our work to make sure that we don't actually have an extraneous solution. So again, my first step is to isolate my absolute value, and you can see here my absolute value is isolated. There's nothing else over on this left side. So now I'm going to go ahead and create my case 1 and case 2. So case 1, I have 3x plus 2 is equal to 4x plus 5. And my case 2 is going to be 3x plus 2 is equal to negative 4x. I'm taking the opposite. And then instead of plus 5, it's going to be minus 5. Alright, so again, notice that the expression inside the absolute value, that stayed exactly the same. And what changed was what was outside, or on the other side of the equal sign. So case 1, that stayed the same too, but case 2, I changed the signs. Alright, so now solving, I will subtract 3x on each side. So I have 2 is equal to x plus 5. Then I'll subtract 2, or subtract 5, sorry. And so I get x is equal to negative 3. On case 2, when I go about solving, I'm going to add 4x to both sides. I get 7x plus 2 is equal to negative 5. I'll subtract 2 to each side, and I'll get 7x is equal to negative 7. And when I divide by 7, I end up with x is equal to negative 1. Alright, so I found 2 answers, but now I have to check to see if they both actually work. So now I'm going to plug them back into the original. So checking, let me change colors here. So I'm going to check case 1. So I have absolute value 3 times negative 3 plus 2, absolute value, is equal to 4 times negative 3 plus 5. Alright, so inside my absolute value, I have negative 9 plus 2 is equal to 4 times negative 3 is negative 12 plus 5. Inside the absolute value, I get negative 7 when I combine negative 9 and 2, and that's equal to negative 7. And then taking the absolute value of negative 7, I get 7 is equal to negative 7. Well, that obviously is not true. So negative 3, my case 1, that does not work. That's an extraneous solution. A solution that I definitely did my steps right, but when I plug it back in, it does not work. So I now have to go and check case 2 because I could have 2 extraneous solutions. Maybe neither of them works. Maybe this is an absolute value equation that has no solution. So let me clear up some room, or let me scroll. See, I can't figure that out. There we go. Scroll up, make myself some more room here, and I'm going to check case 2. So plugging in for negative 1, I have absolute value of 3 times negative 1 plus 2, absolute value, is equal to 4 times negative 1 plus 5. So inside absolute values, I have negative 3 plus 2, absolute value is equal to negative 4 plus 5. And then inside my absolute value, I get negative 1 absolute value is equal to 1. And then taking the absolute value of negative 1, I get 1 is equal to 1. And that works. So this is actually my only answer. X equals negative 1 is my only solution to this absolute value equation. Alright, so scrolling back up, you guys try this U-try problem. And that's it for part 1. So see my next video for part 2 so you can finish out section 6.